Welcome to Real Estate for Beginners. I'm Gershon Levy. In this episode, we're going to talk about the contingency periods, things like the due diligence period, the appraisal contingency period, and the loan contingency period. I hope you guys enjoy. So let's talk about contingency periods. Remember, contingency periods relate to the EMD, or the earnest money deposit, right? These are the rules safeguarding what happens to that deposit for the buyer in the event that they have to cancel for an accepted reason or an unaccepted reason. So there's 4 different clauses, 4 different contingency periods that we want to worry about. And before I get into each one of them, I want to say that each of them has a certain time frame that's negotiated over in the offer. So you'll see up here I have 7 to 14 days, 15 to 22, 18 to 25. When a buyer makes an offer, there's a section in the contract stating how long, let's say, due diligence or the appraisal contingency is going to be, and they'll suggest a certain amount of time. The buyer obviously wants as long as possible in case something goes wrong, right? The seller wants the least time possible for all of these, so they have more of a sure thing about either making the sale happen or being able to get the deposit, or some of it at least, if the buyer is playing around with them and doesn't do things in a timely fashion. So remember, again, contingency periods relate to if the buyer cancels for an accepted reason, can they get their money back? So let's look at these periods and the reasons, and we'll talk about each one individually. So the first one is due diligence, the due diligence period. This, I say, is 7 to 14 days. That's the average amount of time that's given usually to the buyer that's negotiated over. It could be less if it's a seller's market, right? And the seller wants less time for them to do their due diligence. It could be more if the buyer is in a buyer's market and they want more time, but the average is about 7 to 14 days. Now, during this period, a lot of important things happen. Number one, the inspection happens, right? We have inspection up here, where the buyer is going to look really into the house, hire somebody to get in there and figure out, is this house good quality? What things need to be repaired? What's good, what's bad? And once they get the inspection report back, they're going to ask the seller to either repair a couple things or maybe give them some money to do it themselves. Now, during this period, during this due diligence period, I have cancel for anything up here. So this is the beginning stage of the deal. If you wake up, let's say day 5 of a 10-day due diligence period, and you say, I don't want to buy the house anymore, I'm not feeling it. You could call your agent to tell them, the other side, that, hey, he wants to cancel, he's not feeling it, and that's okay. You can cancel for any reason in due diligence. Now, the most commonly accepted reason for canceling, though, right, is because of the inspection. So once the inspection comes back, either the buyer's going to be like, hey, this is too many things that are wrong with it, I don't want it, or they're going to ask the seller to fix some things, and maybe the seller doesn't want to fix all the things the buyer wants done. If they can't come to an agreement, then the buyer can cancel and get their money back. So due diligence is right at the beginning, right? 7 to 14 days, you can cancel for anything. You do your inspection, and if you can't come to an agreement on the repairs from that inspection, then generally the buyer will cancel and move on. Number 2, we have appraisal contingency. The average time is 15 to 22 days from the beginning of the contract. So what's happening here? Well, remember we talked about if you're getting a loan, right? The lender is giving you a certain amount of money based on what you and the seller think the value of the home is. So if you have a $500,000 home, right, and the lender is giving you 95% of that as a loan, so let's say $475,000, okay? They're doing that based on the idea, based on the thought that the home is at least worth the $500,000 that you guys agreed upon, right? The $475,000 loan plus the $25,000 down payment. So they want to make sure that if they're going to give you a $475,000 loan, that they're giving you a loan for a property that's actually worth what they think it is. So lenders will order an appraisal that the buyer pays for, and an appraisal is done by an appraiser, right? And basically this is a professional person that's very skilled in figuring out the value of things. They will go out to the house, spend a few hours there, look at everything, and come up with a value of the home based on what's inside the home and based on what the other homes in the area are selling for. Now, if that price comes back lower than what the purchase price is, what you agreed the purchase price to be, then the appraisal contingency states that you as the buyer can renegotiate the price, because the lender is not going to give you 100% of the house or even close to that sometimes. So if it comes back, let's say, that the value of the home is not $500,000, but it's instead $475,000, which is what they were going to lend you, they're going to be like, hey, we can't give you that much anymore, right? We can give you maybe $450,000 now. You need to go back to the seller and get them to come down on their price. So the contingency states that you can renegotiate. Now the seller can be like, I don't want to come down on price, right? If you can only get a loan for $450,000 now, then you should come up with the rest of the amount in cash. And if you don't agree to that as the buyer, right, you can say, hey, if you're not going to renegotiate with me, I'm going to cancel and get my money back. And that's what happens with the appraisal contingency. So as long as the appraisal happens and you get it back within this time frame and it's not what you want, you can renegotiate or you can cancel. Number 3 is the loan contingency period. This is about 18 to 25 days from the beginning of the contract. And what it states is if in the event of the escrow period, the lender for some reason cannot get you approved finally for the loan, right? If you know before that, let's say you have 25 days. If you know before that 25 days is over and the lender can say, hey, we cannot get them the loan, something happened with their credit, something's going on that we didn't know about, and you're denied, right? Obviously, if there's no loan, there's no deal, right? No loan, no deal. So the loan contingency states that if you cannot qualify and get approved for the loan in that time frame, then you can cancel the contract as the buyer and get your money back, no questions asked. And then finally, we have number 4, which is the HOA contingency. So this starts 5 days from when you receive the paperwork about the HOA. So when you're buying a home that's in an HOA community, right, the seller will order some documents from the HOA pertaining to the rules of that HOA. And they have to give you those rules so you as the buyer can review them and figure out if you actually want to live in this HOA, right? Some HOAs have some pretty crazy rules, so you want to make sure that you're okay with that style of life. If in the 5 days after you get that paperwork, you realize that the rules are too prohibitive and you don't want to live there anymore, you can sign on the HOA receipt that you get that you don't want it anymore, you want to cancel the contract, and you'll get your money back, right? So this one does not start from the beginning as the other 3 do. This one starts from the time you get the paperwork. So we know about due diligence, appraisal contingency, loan contingency, HOA contingency. And again, remember, this is in case something happens where the buyer has to cancel, right? What happens to their money? Now, let's say we have 14 days for due diligence, right? And on the 16th day of the contract, the buyer's like, you know what? I woke up this morning, I had the worst feeling in my stomach. I don't want to buy this house anymore. Let me cancel. Well, the seller can say, hey man, you didn't do it inside of the due diligence period, so you can't just cancel because you want to, right? There has to be a legitimate reason, right? Did it not appraise? Did you not get approved for the loan? Is the HOA too prohibitive, right? Again, same thing with appraisal. Let's say the appraisal comes back. Let's say you have 18 days for the appraisal, and the appraisal comes back on day 20 because the lender ordered it late or something. And the appraisal comes back low and you're like, hey man, I can't pay this full amount because the house is worth way less than we thought. Let's renegotiate. They can be like, hey, you came to me on day 20 and you had until day 18 to renegotiate based on the appraisal. So I'm not going to renegotiate with you. You can't cancel for this reason, right? And so on and so forth based on this. So it's very important to pay attention to when these deadlines are, to make sure that when you're making an offer, that you're talking to your lender, you're figuring out how much time you need to get an appraisal done, to get the loan approved, and that you're not shortchanging yourself and ending up in a situation where, oh my God, I have to cancel, but I missed the deadlines to do it. So now it's a question of whether or not I'm getting my earnest deposit. The series is not quite over yet, so make sure you watch the next video, and please don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Have a great day, and thanks so much.